I was not sorry when my brother died. The blame was supposed to be put on all three of them because what kind of abomination is that? And she said that she doesn't want to do it anymore and that she's leaving, and she actually did. She left.
Love like a mountain that cannot be moved. Just as an eagle, I found freedom in you, a peace which brings me.
Hey loves, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Audrey and I make content about all things wellness, and if that's your kind of thing, please consider staying by subscribing. It's nice here. It is a vibe. So I am back with another book review. This is an ode to younger Audrey because this is a reread of Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembwa. And this was one of the first books I ever studied in literature. So if you're interested in that book review, keep watching. Nervous Conditions follows the story of Tambu, a young Zimbabwean girl who grew up in the rural areas without a lot of opportunities. But against all odds, and because of certain circumstances, she has gone from being educated in rural Zimbabwe to a mission school. And what we call a mission school in Zimbabwe is a school that was opened by the missionaries that came to spread the gospel in Zimbabwe. So we call it a mission school. To another mission school which was way more advanced as her high school. There are certain themes that I'm going to dive into within the story, but let me tell you the story of the most prominent characters. In Tambu's immediate family, there is Jeremiah, who is her father, Mai, who is her mother, Namo, her elder brother, Tambu, and her two younger sisters. Growing up, her father is portrayed as someone who is very lazy, who does not take responsibility for maintaining the homestead, but relies on his older brother. And because of this, the children and the mother are the ones that have taken it upon themselves to go to the fields to sow, harvest, and tend for the family. And during the holidays, they have Bankuru, which is Jeremiah's older brother, who comes and they spend Christmas there. They spend about 2 weeks of Christmas in the homestead, and during this time they eat meat, bread with margarine, tea with milk and sugar. And this is something very typical in Zimbabwe even at the moment. The holidays are the times that people indulge, and people usually save a lot for the Christmas holiday because it's a time for celebration. Now the novel starts with a shocking statement from Tambu saying, "I was not sorry when my brother died." So yes, Namo dies 2 years after he started going to school at Bamkuru's mission. So I guess I have to segue into Bamkuru and why he had a mission, and then I will come back to the story, which is exactly how the novel is written. Bamkuru, Jeremiah's older brother, had the opportunity to go to school with the missionaries. And the person who brought about the opportunity was Tambu's grandmother, Jeremiah and Bankuru's mother. And so we step back into the origin story of their poverty, which was colonization and displacement. In the olden times in Zimbabwe, many people owned their land, many people worked on their land, and this is where they got their food. If they didn't have that, they had cattle. But when colonization came to Zimbabwe, there was a lot of displacement of the owners of the land, the good fertile land, being moved to the sandy and the stony land, which they could not harvest well. So that is how the native Zimbabweans were pushed into poverty because of colonization. When this happened, Jeremiah's mother, Tambu's grandmother, approached the wizards, which is what they call them in the books. These are the good wizards because they were the missionaries. And she approached them and she said that Bamkuru, her eldest son, was a very bright boy, and they took him in, gave him an education, and he excelled. He then got a job at the mission school and they sent him abroad to the UK to further his education. But at this point, he was already married with 2 children of his own, Nyasha and Chido, a boy and a girl. And his wife was also educated. So he didn't feel it was okay to leave his family. So the missionaries agreed to educate both Bamkuru, Maiguru, and move the children to the UK for the years in which they needed to study. And then they came back. When they came back, they started working on uplifting the family. And the family tree that needed uplifting was Jeremiah and his family, because he was the lazy one, because they also had other siblings that were doing well for themselves. They had a sister, a brother, and Bamkuru, the sister and the brother, were doing well. The only person and the only sibling that was not doing well was Jeremiah. Fast forward, Bamkuru comes back from the UK. He speaks to Jeremiah about uplifting his side of the family, and how better else to do that than to educate Jeremiah's son, who was Namo. Namo went to the mission and he changed. He was always studying at the mission, and when he was in the presence of Bankuru, he seemed to be hardworking. When it came to studying, yes, he was very good with the studies, but in every other aspect, he became as lazy as his father. And when he would come home, he would bully his younger sister, Netsai, to go and carry his books from the bus stop, even though he was able to carry them. He just wanted to be a bother and to show that he had power over Netsai. He couldn't do that to Tambu, however, because Tambu always stood up for her rights. And when he would come home, he would not help in the fields because he said that he had to study. My guru, Bamkuru's wife, would give some gifts for the family, which included tea, coffee, sugar, but he wouldn't give it to the family and made an excuse that this was what would help him study. So when he moved to the mission, he came back as a changed, lazy person and selfish person. So this was Tambu's justification of saying she was not sorry when her brother died. Tambu, coming from this household, you can only imagine how difficult it was for her to actually study, because not only did she have to help her mom with the work in the homestead, but money wasn't easy to come by. So she asked her father for some land and some seeds so she could plant her own maize, sell it, and pay for her school fees, because she was 2 years behind with her education. And the father didn't want to do so because he thought it was going to need some sort of work from him. But the mother encouraged the father to allow Tambu to actually cultivate her own land and grow some maize. But she also said, how else is she going to learn that she is not always going to get what she wants? She should try, because they both felt like she was going to fail. But fail, she did not. Unfortunately, when it was time for harvest, her maize cobs started disappearing. And who, pray tell, was making her maize disappear? Her own brother. He was giving out the maize to the other students at school. And when Tambu realized this, she walked straight to the school, got into a fight with her brother, and the principal of the school saw this. And he asked why they were fighting. Tambu explained, and the principal said, well, if you go with me to Mutare town, you're going to sell your maize for a lot more money than you would here in the rural areas. They agreed to go and sell the maize, although the father was against it. But they did go and sell the maize. They didn't really sell the maize because there was a woman there who thought that the principal was using Tambu as child labor and he was chastising him. And then he told the lady about Tambu's story, and she donated money to them, and they left without even having to sell the maize, but with enough money to cover Tambu's school fees for about 2 years. When Jeremiah heard about this, he said that it was his money. And had they given Jeremiah this money, he was just going to drink it away. But the principal was wise enough to just pay it into the school, and Tambu was able to go back to school. A year later, unfortunately, Tambu's brother passed away. He fell sick while he was still at the mission, and he didn't come home. So after the death of her brother, Bamkuru now suggested that Tambu go and live with them at the mission and get a better education at the mission. In comes the theme of emancipation. So we look at Bankuru as the first person in this family to be emancipated from poverty because of the resilience that the mother had and the determination that she had when she went to speak to the missionaries. So he was the first pillar of the family to move out of that status quo of poverty. Then we look at Namo escaping from the requirements or the duties of the homestead because he was also pursuing an education. Here we have Tambu also escaping the poverty of the homestead because she was pursuing an education. And then we move on to life at the mission. Now remember, Nyasha and Chido, Bamkuru's children, Tambu's cousins. Chido went to a mission school that was different from the one where Bamkuru was principal. This one was a better mission school, a private mission school, and he was never around. So the only person who was around with Tambu was Nyasha. Now Nyasha had a very hard identity crisis, which I understood came from the fact that they moved to the UK when they were very young. And the culture they learned was that of the UK. And when they came back to Zimbabwe, they had already been in their formative years. So they hardly understood the language, which was Shona. They didn't understand the culture, even down to the way people dress. So Nyasha was expected to behave in a manner of a culture she did not understand. When they were in the UK, her behavior was okay because that was the behavior of all the children in the UK. But when they came back, she was expected to switch. But it was difficult for her to do so. Not only because of the culture clash, but also because she understood that although everyone saw Bankuru as the savior, the pillar, the one who is helping out the different branches of the family, he was also being an oppressor to his own wife. Because my guru was also well educated, therefore she also had a good job and a good salary, but she never touched her money. Bankuru took all of his money and her money to develop his family. And this was something that Tambu got to realize later on in the situation. But before that, she had always been judgmental to Nyasha. Because where Nyasha's mother, my guru, didn't speak up, she would speak up. Not for her mother, but for herself. Because she felt like she was going to be entrapped just like her mother was, because of this culture she was born into. But when Tambu then realized the inner goings and doings of Bankuru and his family, she was a lot more empathetic and sympathetic to Nyasha. Moving forward a couple of years, there are some problems that started showing up in the family. I say problems, but they're not really that, but you'll understand when I tell you the story. When Namo passed away, Jeremiah started complaining that he didn't have help around the homestead. So Bankuru asked a cousin of theirs, Take Shore, to come and live with Jeremiah so they can do work around the homestead. They did no such thing. They would spend their days drinking at the beer hall, at the shops. Now Jeremiah's wife, Mai, had a younger sister called Lucia, who was termed promiscuous because she had been sleeping with not only take sure, but Jeremiah, her sister's husband, out of wedlock, and she was pregnant. And to be honest, we all don't know who she was pregnant for. However, this was becoming a very big problem because Lucia spoke out whenever people tried to oppress her or repress her. So one of the holidays that they came home for Christmas, that was Bamkuru, Maiguru, Nyasha. Chido usually didn't come home. He would spend the holidays with his friends. Tambu, her siblings, her mother, who was also pregnant at that time, Lucia, Take Sure, Jeremiah, the patriarch, which would be the siblings of Jeremiah and Bankuru, and they had a meeting, a family meeting. And they were discussing the issue of Lucia. As they were discussing this, instead of putting blame on either Jeremiah or Take Sure, they were saying that the problem came from Lucia. I believe that all of them were wrong. The blame was supposed to be put on all three of them, because what kind of abomination is that? But instead of putting the blame on the male relatives in the family and holding them accountable, they said that, or let me say Bamkuru because he had the last word. He said that all the problems within the family were coming because Mai and Jeremiah had not been officially married and they were living in sin. Not that Jeremiah could not stop himself from being promiscuous, no, because they were not married. So there was a spectacle of a marriage that was about to happen, and my guru was not really happy about it because Bamkuru was making more of a fuss over Jeremiah's wedding than he had over hers, and she even made a comment to Nyasha saying that your father is not even going to be this invested in your own marriage. Now remember, we never heard any mention of my guru's family. Everything was always centered on her husband's family. So she considered Nyasha her family, and so the attention was not going to come to her either. This is when we see Tambu actually voicing out her opinion for the first time. Because when she went into that house, she went in very grateful, and rightfully so, for the opportunity that she had been given by Bamkuru. But when certain things were going wrong, she couldn't voice her opinion about it, except for when this spectacle of a wedding was suggested and was about to happen. She woke up, she couldn't move. Bamkuru was calling her all manners of disrespectful, and finally she said that she didn't want to attend the wedding, and she didn't actually attend the wedding. So this was the first time that Tambu was emancipated from the woman or the girl who was expected to always say yes, whether she agrees with something or not. So fast forward, after the wedding, there was some tension between Bamkuru and Tambu because of what had happened. And at this point, Lucia was working at the mission because previously she had asked Bamkuru to help her find a job so she can be able to take care of her child and she wouldn't have to be with Take Sure or Jeremiah. And this was a solution that was found. Now, when Tam disobeyed Bamkuru, she had the punishment of taking care of the household. They had a helper and she was given a vacation, so Tambu was the one who was taking care of the whole household, which was a lot of work, and Nyasha would help. So there was a day that Lucia came to the house and she saw Tambu doing all the laundry, and she asked why this was so, and Tambu told her the reason was because she disagreed with this issue of her parents' wedding. Lucia then went into the house and asked for Bamkuru, to which my guru said that he was not around. Is there anything she could help with? And Lucia said, oh no, this is a matter I can only speak to Bamkuru about. And this stirred something up in my guru. I think that she had been holding back a lot of things for a lot of years, because when Bamkuru came back, she exploded. She exploded, and she said that she has been taking disrespect from Bamkuru's family the whole time, where they call her a snob, or they call her someone who doesn't like to work, or she thinks she is better than them, when they don't know that most of the things that he does for his family are also because of the salary that he takes from her. And she said that she doesn't want to do it anymore and that she's leaving, and she actually did. She left. Nyasha was partly happy about it, because of course this meant that she could look up to her mother again. But she was also sad because her mother was leaving. Tambu was sort of shocked, but she understood with living with them how the situation in the household was. Later on, they got a call from Chido, because the mother had called Chido, who in turn called Nyasha and said that she was at her brother's place. And Nyasha was kind of disappointed that her mother had run to another man, but she was also happy that her mother was safe. When they conveyed this message to Bamkuru, he immediately drove off to take his wife. But when his wife came back, she was changed. She was able to voice her opinion. She was able to stop doing things to try and please people who did not appreciate her, which included going to the homestead sometimes, which also included some of the things that were required of her that she would do willy-nilly before. And this included agreeing with everything that Bamkuru would say. So after the punishment, Tambu now had this opportunity to go to a private mission school for her high school. But Bamkuru was against it because he did not trust the morals that Tambu would learn from that mission school. He said it was going to be expensive, because the uniform alone would pay for a whole year of school fees at his mission. But as they were sitting, Bamkuru was expecting my guru to agree with him that it was not a good idea for Tambu to go to this private mission school. But my guru, for the first time, disagreed with Bamkuru and said that if it is a financial issue, Tambu got a full scholarship, and the only thing that they needed to provide for her was the uniform. And this was going to be a very good opportunity for Tambu, just like he had gotten the opportunity from the missionaries. And so Tambu ended up going to this high school, which brings in another issue of segregation even in the mission schools, because in their boarding rooms, the normal rooms where the white people slept only had 4 beds and 4 wardrobes. But there were only 6 black girls that came to the mission school, and so they were sharing a room. So instead of 4 beds, they had 6 beds and still 4 wardrobes. So Bamkuru noted that and said, well, all the other girls have this, but with the black girls, it seems like they don't even have space. And the nun pointed out that, well, they have more black people at the school this year, which is something she said quite proudly so. But Bamkuru was not amused, rightfully so. Anyway, the story follows the excitement in which Tambu felt to be at this school, how big it was, how vast the library was, and she was excelling in her studies. But on the other hand, Nyasha wasn't doing so well, because when Tambu was around, she had someone to talk to about the issues and the identity crisis that she was going through. But in Tambu's Essentia, she wasn't doing so well. And this is basically where the book ends, with Tambu being emancipated from a family that did not believe in her, did not believe in her goals, and a society that did not prioritize girls, to this opportunity of her being at this very prestigious high school. The emancipation of my guru from not having a voice in her own household, the emancipation of Bamkuru from the life of poverty because of the displacement of his family from good land to poor land, through education, and also the issue of racial inequality and segregation that still continue to happen even in the schools. So that is it. My book review on Nervous Conditions. It is such a beautiful read, and when I was reading it as a young girl, I was just full of excitement for Tambu. But reading it now and seeing the themes the way I see them now, and how some of these things are still a reality in Zimbabwe even up to now, actually breaks my heart. But I know that more books like this that capture and provoke what is happening in society and trying to change the societal norms is the way for us to develop into a better society where we find everyone being treated equally. Alright guys, so we have gotten to the end of this video. If you have gotten to this part of the video, can you please comment down below something that stood out for you? And if you have read Nervous Conditions, please tell me if you like the book. If you haven't read it yet, it's a great book. I highly recommend that you look for it and read it as well. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, share, tell your friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, and subscribe, and I'll see you next Sunday.